The morning of August 6, 1945, began like any other humid summer day in the city of Hiroshima. Commuters were rushing to work, children were gathered in schoolyards to start their morning routines, and the city was buzzing with the noise of wartime industry. At 8:14 a.m., the sky was blue and clear, and the air raid sirens had fallen silent, assuming the small group of planes overhead was just a reconnaissance mission. 1 minute later, the world changed forever. This is the story of the moment humanity unlocked the power of the stars to destroy itself, the story of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. To understand how we arrived at this cataclysmic moment, we have to look back at the state of the world in 1945. The war in Europe had ended in May with the defeat of Nazi Germany. But in the Pacific, the Second World War was still raging with a terrifying intensity. The Empire of Japan, driven by a code of honor that viewed surrender as the ultimate disgrace, was preparing to fight to the bitter end. The United States and its allies were facing a grim calculation. They were planning Operation Downfall, a massive, full-scale invasion of the Japanese main islands. Military analysts predicted that this invasion would cost over 1 million American casualties and potentially tens of millions of Japanese lives. But there was another option. For years, in secret laboratories across America, the Manhattan Project had been racing to build a weapon of unimaginable power. Led by physicist J. Robert Oppenheimer, the team had successfully tested the first atomic bomb in the New Mexico desert in July 1945. Upon seeing the explosion, Oppenheimer famously recalled the line from Hindu scripture, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." President Truman, who had only been in office for a few months following the death of Franklin Roosevelt, was faced with the most difficult decision in human history: to invade and prolong the war for years, or to unleash this new, terrifying weapon to force a swift surrender. On July 26th, the Allies issued the Potsdam Declaration, demanding the unconditional surrender of all Japanese armed forces. The alternative, they warned, was prompt and utter destruction. Japan ignored the ultimatum. And so, the order was given. In the early hours of August 6th, a B-29 Super Fortress bomber named the Enola Gay took off from Tinian Island in the Pacific. Piloted by Colonel Paul Tibbets, the plane carried a single bomb. It was a uranium gun-type bomb, codenamed Little Boy. It looked surprisingly small, 10 feet long and weighing nearly 10,000 pounds, but inside it held the power of 15,000 tons of TNT. The target was Hiroshima, a city of considerable military importance, but also a city filled with 350,000 civilians. At 8:15 a.m., the Enola Gay dropped the bomb over the IOE Bridge, a T-shaped bridge in the center of the city, which served as the visual target. The bomb fell for 43 seconds. At nearly 2,000 feet above the ground, the detonator triggered. The explosion created a flash of light brighter than 1,000 suns. It was so intense that it blinded anyone looking directly at it for miles. Following the light came the heat. At the hypocenter, the temperature hit 7,000 degrees Celsius. It was hot enough to melt steel, turn sand into glass, and instantly vaporize human beings, leaving behind nothing but nuclear shadows. Dark outlines burned onto walls and pavement where people had been standing just a split second before. Then came the blast wave. A wall of air moving faster than the speed of sound leveled nearly every building in within a 1-mile radius. 70,000 people died instantly. Those who survived the initial blast wandered through a city that had been turned into hell on earth. Survivors, known in Japan as Hibakusha, described scenes of utter nightmare. People with skin hanging off their bodies, desperate for water, walking like ghosts through the ashes. Then the black rain began to fall. It was sticky, radioactive precipitation that poisoned the thirsty survivors who opened their mouths to drink it. By the end of 1945, the death toll in Hiroshima would rise to 140,000. You might think that such devastation would end the war immediately, but it didn't. In Tokyo, the Japanese Supreme War Council was deadlocked. The military hardliners refused to believe the reports coming from Hiroshima. They argued that the Americans couldn't possibly have another bomb, or that they should fight until the last citizen was dead to preserve the honor of the emperor. To make matters worse for Japan, on August 8th, the Soviet Union declared war on Japan and invaded Manchuria. Japan was now being squeezed from all sides. But still, there was no word of surrender. The United States decided to drop a second bomb. The date was set for August 9th, just 3 days after Hiroshima. A second B-29 named Bockscar, piloted by Major Charles Sweeney, took off carrying a plutonium implosion bomb. This one was rounder and fatter, earning it the codename Fat Man. It was even more powerful than the one dropped in Hiroshima. However, the mission did not go as planned. The primary target was not Nagasaki. It was the city of Kokura. When Bockscar arrived over Kokura, they found this city covered in thick haze and smoke from a nearby firebombing raid. The orders were strict. They had to be able to see the target visually. They made 3 passes over the city, but the bombardier couldn't see the ground. With fuel running low due to a pump failure, Major Sweeney made a fateful decision. He abandoned the primary target and turned south toward the secondary target, Nagasaki. Nagasaki was an old port city, nestled in a valley surrounded by mountains. At 11:02 a.m., Bockscar found a break in the clouds. Fat Man was released. Because of the geography of Nagasaki, the mountains contained the blast slightly, preventing it from spreading as far as it did in Hiroshima. But the bomb was more powerful. It exploded over the Orakami Valley, home to the largest Catholic cathedral in East Asia. In an instant, 40,000 people were killed. The total death toll would end up reaching over 70,000. The destruction was absolute. Wooden homes were crushed like matchboxes, factories were twisted into scrap metal, and once again, the civilians bore the brunt of a new invisible horror called radiation. Finally, the reality could no longer be denied. The Emperor of Japan, Hirohito, who was considered a living god by his people, did something unprecedented. He intervened. Breaking the deadlock of his military council, he decided that the war must end to prevent the total annihilation of the Japanese nation. However, even this was dangerous. Young military officers attempted a coup to seize the recording of the emperor's surrender speech before it could be broadcast, hoping to continue the war. The coup failed. On August 15, 1945, the emperor's voice was broadcast over the radio. It was the first time the common people of Japan had ever heard his voice. He spoke in formal, archaic court Japanese, never actually using the word surrender, but stating that the war situation had developed not necessarily to Japanese advantage, and that the enemy possessed a new and most cruel bomb. The war was over. The legacy of those 2 days in August remains with us today. In the peace memorial parks of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, there is a solemn atmosphere. In Hiroshima, the Gendoku Dome, the skeletal remains of an industrial promotion hall, stands exactly as it did after the blast, a haunting reminder of the destruction. But perhaps the most powerful legacy comes from the survivors. For decades, they have traveled the world, sharing their scars and their stories, not to call for revenge, but to plead for peace. Their message is simple: no more Hiroshimas, no more Nagasaki's. The bombings ended the most destructive war in human history, but they opened the door to the atomic age. For the first time, humanity possessed the ability to extinguish itself. As we look back at the history of these two cities, we are reminded of the fragility of civilization. The story of the atomic bomb is not just a story of military strategy or scientific breakthrough. It is a story of human suffering and a warning that echoes through time. It is a reminder that some doors, once opened, can never be closed. If you found this story fascinating, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into history. Thank you for watching.